For over 4 decades, a predator stalked the golden suburbs of California, a phantom who slipped into homes under the cover of darkness, leaving behind a trail of terror, blood, and an eerie, suffocating silence that haunted an entire state. 13 murders, 50 rapes, over 100 burglaries. He was a ghost, a specter who struck with surgical precision, mocking detectives, shattering lives, and evading justice for 40 long years, his identity cloaked in shadow, his crimes a wound that refused to heal, a nightmare that seemed eternal. But in 2018, a scientific breakthrough tore through that silence, unmasking one of America's most terrifying serial killers, revealing a monster who had been hiding in plain sight, living a life so ordinary, so unremarkable, that it defied comprehension. This wasn't a drifter or a recluse. This was a neighbor, a father, a former cop, a man you'd pass on the street without a second glance. How could someone commit such unspeakable horrors, violating homes, stealing lives, and spreading fear like a plague, only to vanish without a trace, leaving entire communities paralyzed? What was the secret weapon, the revolutionary technology, that finally stripped away his mask, bringing him to justice after decades of impunity? And what does this chilling saga reveal about the predators who might still be out there, lurking among us, their secrets buried deep, waiting for the moment truth catches up? Stay with us, because in the next few minutes, we're diving deep into the heart of the Golden State Killer case, a true crime odyssey that spans fear-soaked decades, from the paralyzing terror of the 1970s to the moment science delivered a checkmate no one saw coming. Hit that like button, and let's unravel a story that will grip you, twist your mind, and hold you captive until the very last second. A tale of darkness, resilience, and a breakthrough that changed justice forever. This is one mystery you won't be able to look away from, not for a single heartbeat, because every moment pulses with the unsettling truth of what lies hidden in the shadows of our world. Close your eyes and step into California in the 1970s, a land of endless sunshine, boundless dreams, and a cultural heartbeat that pulsed with promise. Sacramento's suburban neighborhoods are a vision of the American dream. Ranch-style homes with neatly trimmed lawns, station wagons parked in driveways, children's bicycles scattered on sidewalks, their handlebar streamers fluttering in the warm breeze. Families gather for backyard barbecues, the scent of charcoal and grilled burgers mingling with the laughter of kids playing tag, the clink of iced tea glasses, and the faint hum of AM radio playing Fleetwood Mac or the Eagles. Palm trees sway against azure skies, and the air carries the optimism of a state that feels like the edge of the future. Hollywood glamour, Silicon Valley innovation, and a counterculture still echoing from the 60s. It's a postcard of suburban bliss, a world where doors are left unlocked at night, windows cracked open to catch the cool evening air, and neighbors wave as they jog past, their dogs trotting alongside. But as dusk settles, a shadow creeps over these sleepy streets, turning safety into a cruel illusion, transforming this idyllic world into a landscape of dread, where every rustling leaf, every creaking branch, becomes a harbinger of terror. A predator is out there, moving like a wraith in the darkness, his footsteps silent, his presence a suffocating weight that presses against every home, every heart. He slips through backyards, scales 6-foot fences with ease, and pries open sliding glass doors with chilling precision, his gloved hands steady, his movements practiced, as if he's rehearsed this dance 100 times before. Inside, he binds his victims with shoelaces, extension cords, or strips of torn towels, his knots tight, his control absolute, a master of domination who thrives on their fear. His voice is a raspy whisper, a venomous hiss that chills the soul, issuing commands laced with menace. Don't move, or you're dead. He doesn't just attack. He torments, stacking dishes on husbands' backs, threatening to kill if they shift, the clatter of porcelain a death sentence. He forces wives to endure unimaginable horrors while their loved ones lie helpless nearby, their hearts pounding in the suffocating silence, their minds racing with the terror of what comes next. He lingers, rifling through drawers for jewelry, eating leftovers from the fridge, drinking soda from cans, leaving behind a trail of violation that's as psychological as it is physical, a desecration of the sanctity of home. The air is thick with dread, the silence broken only by his eerie taunts, the soft clink of stolen coins, or the faint creak of a floorboard as he moves through the house like a specter, untouchable, unstoppable. By morning, he's gone, vanishing into the dawn, leaving behind shattered lives, empty jewelry boxes, and a community paralyzed by paranoia, their sense of security ripped away like a flimsy curtain. Streets once bustling with life grow eerily quiet after dusk, their sidewalks deserted, their windows sealed tight behind newly installed bars. Blinds are drawn, deadbolts clicked into place, guns tucked under pillows or hidden in nightstands, neighbors eyeing each other with suspicion, wondering if the monster could be one of their own. A co-worker, a friend, the man next door. This is a California under siege, gripped by a terror that has many names: East Area Rapist, Original Night Stalker, and finally, the Golden State Killer, a title that captures the vastness of his reign of fear, a predator whose crimes stretched from Sacramento's quiet suburbs to the coastal towns of Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Orange County, a decade-long rampage that turned the Golden State into a prison of panic, its residents hostages to an invisible enemy. How could one man hold an entire state hostage, his identity cloaked in shadow, his motives as elusive as his escape routes? What kind of mind could orchestrate such calculated, relentless cruelty, turning homes into traps, families into prey, and safety into a distant, fading memory? Why did it take so long to even glimpse the face behind the mask? And what did it mean that he seemed to know our fears better than we did ourselves? The nightmare began in the summer of 1976 in Sacramento, a series of rapes so methodical, so chilling, that they seemed the work of a machine rather than a man, a predator who operated with a terrifying efficiency that left investigators stunned. He targeted middle-class neighborhoods in Sacramento County, Rancho Cordova, Carmichael, Citrus Heights, striking single women or couples, always at night, always with a plan that left nothing to chance, as if he'd studied his craft in some dark academy of crime. He'd scout homes for days, sometimes weeks, learning routines with obsessive precision, when husbands left for work, when kids went to school, when lights went out, signaling the house was vulnerable. He mapped escape routes through backyards, alleys, and canal paths, memorizing the labyrinth of suburban streets to slip away unseen. He studied the architecture of homes, exploiting weak points like sliding glass doors, basement windows, or crawl spaces, knowing their vulnerabilities better than their owners. He'd prepare in advance, cutting phone lines to isolate his victims, unlocking windows days earlier, even leaving ropes, shoelaces, or towels hidden under bushes or in garages for later use, ensuring every detail was under his control, every contingency accounted for. His attacks were precise, almost ritualistic: black ski masks or balaclavas, leather gloves, knives or handguns, a flashlight's beam cutting through the darkness like a cold, unblinking eye, its light a prelude to terror. He didn't just violate his victims. He toyed with them, lingering for hours, sometimes 3 or 4, creating a theater of fear where he was the director, the star, the god. He'd eat food from their kitchens, crackers, fruit, leftovers, drink their soda or beer, leave half-empty cans on counters, a taunt that screamed his contempt. He'd rifle through drawers, stealing jewelry, coins, personal mementos, not for value but for power, trophies of his dominance. He'd ask personal questions, feigning familiarity. "I know you, don't I?" As if he'd known them for years, amplifying their terror with his eerie calm, his voice a low growl that seemed to come from somewhere inhuman. His crimes were as much about psychological torment as physical violence, a calculated assault on the mind, leaving survivors haunted for decades, their sleep fractured by the memory of his whisper, his silhouette in the doorway. By 1978, his attacks escalated from rape to murder, his brutality intensifying as he moved south to Contra Costa County, Danville, Walnut Creek, then to Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Orange County, his geography sprawling across California like a dark, creeping stain. Couples were bludgeoned to death in their beds with fireplace logs, wrenches, or tools stolen from their own garages. Their homes turned into crime scenes of unimaginable horror, their bodies left in poses that screamed defiance to the police, a challenge to catch him. The media gave him many names, each reflecting a new wave of panic. East Area Rapist for his early crimes in Sacramento, Original Night Stalker for his southern murders, a name coined to distinguish him from Richard Ramirez, the later Night Stalker of the 1980s. It wasn't until 2011 that DNA evidence, painstakingly preserved from rape kits, bloodstains, and semen, linked these disparate cases, revealing a single predator responsible for a decade of terror that spanned 500 miles and countless lives. True crime author Michelle McNamara, whose relentless pursuit of the case in her book I'll Be Gone in the Dark gave him his final, enduring name, dubbed him the Golden State Killer, a title that captured the scope of his crimes, the fear he instilled, and the way he seemed to embody the dark underbelly of California's golden promise. His methods were his signature: silent entry, total control, psychological torment, and an uncanny ability to vanish without a trace, as if he could dissolve into the night itself. He left behind DNA, shoe prints, size 9 sneakers, often with distinctive tread, and stolen trinkets, rings, earrings, cufflinks, but no fingerprints, no clear witnesses, only a void of answers and a growing sense of dread that he was untouchable. Why did he escalate from violation to annihilation, his crimes growing bolder, bloodier, more brazen with each passing year? What drove this predator to haunt California for 10 years, from 1976 to 1986, only to disappear as suddenly as he'd appeared, leaving behind a trail of questions as chilling as his crimes, a silence that felt like a taunt? And how could he evade capture in an era when police were throwing every resource, manpower, forensics, profiling, at him, their desperation mounting as the body count grew? For decades, the Golden State Killer was a ghost, a puzzle that frustrated the best minds in law enforcement, a shadow that seemed to mock every effort to catch him, his laughter echoing in the dead ends and false leads that piled up like tombstones. Police departments across California, from Sacramento to Irvine, from Contra Costa to Orange County, chased thousands of leads, interviewed countless suspects, and followed every tip, no matter how faint. But the killer remained untouchable, a specter who seemed to know their every move, anticipate their every strategy. His last known crime was on May 4th, 1986, the rape and murder of 18-year-old Janelle Cruz in Irvine, a final act of brutality that left her bludgeoned in her bed, her life stolen just as she was beginning to live it. Then silence. No more attacks, no taunting phone calls to victims, no confessions, just a void where answers should have been, a sudden cessation that was as baffling as his crimes. The case went cold, but the fear lingered, a scar on California's soul, a wound that bled every time a new crime reminded people of the phantom who'd never been caught. Detectives worked tirelessly, their lives consumed by the hunt, their marriages strained, their sleep haunted by the faces of victims they couldn't avenge. They canvassed neighborhoods, knocking on doors at dawn, their notebooks filled with vague, maddening descriptions. A man in a jogger's outfit lurking near a canal, a suspicious car idling at a corner, a figure in the shadows who vanished when approached. The FBI and local agencies built psychological profiles, painting a picture of a white male, likely in his 20s or 30s during the crimes, possibly with law enforcement or military training, given his knowledge of police tactics, knot tying, intricate diamond knots, a sailor's skill, and evasion. He knew how houses were built, navigating crawl spaces, roof lines, and ventilation shafts with ease, as if he'd studied architecture or construction. He used counter-surveillance techniques, doubling back to check for tails, parking blocks away to avoid detection, even scattering red herrings like stolen license plates. Some theorized he was a cop, his familiarity with procedure too precise to be coincidence. Others suggested a soldier, his discipline and stamina hinting at military training. A few speculated he was a real estate agent or utility worker, someone with access to home layouts or neighborhood patterns. Witnesses describe a man of average build, 5 feet 8 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, 160 pounds, sometimes masked, sometimes not. His voice a harsh whisper, his eyes cold and unyielding, like a predator sizing up prey. But descriptions varied, sketches conflicted. Some saw a young man with light brown hair, others a stockier figure with a different jawline. Some reported a high-pitched voice, others a deeper growl, and leads fizzled out, swallowed by the fog of time, the unreliability of memory, and the killer's chameleon-like ability to blend in. The public was desperate, their fear turning to frustration as years stretched into decades without an arrest, the case becoming a symbol of justice denied. Vigils were held for victims, their names, Sherry Domingo, Greg Sanchez, Manuela Withun, Janelle Cruz, etched into the collective memory of communities that refused to forget. Rewards climbed to $50,000. Billboards along Interstate 5 pleaded for tips. True crime shows like America's Most Wanted featured the case. But the killer remained a phantom, his crimes a legend whispered in California's suburbs. A boogeyman story that felt too real, too raw. Detectives grew old, retired, or died, their files gathering dust in evidence rooms, their obsession with the case a weight they carried to their graves, a promise unfulfilled. DNA evidence, collected from rape kits, bloodstains, and semen, sat in storage, a taunt with no match in early criminal databases like Cody's, which didn't exist until the 1990s and grew slowly. Task forces formed and dissolved, their efforts hampered by jurisdictional rivalries, Sacramento versus Orange County, sheriff versus police, limited technology, and the sheer scale of the killer spree, which spanned 10 counties, hundreds of crime scenes, and thousands of potential suspects. The case became a myth, a wound that refused to heal, a reminder that justice could be outrun, that evil could slip through the cracks of a system stretched thin. Why couldn't the police catch a man who left so many clues, DNA, size 9 shoe prints with distinctive waffle treads, stolen items like class rings and monogram cufflinks, even ligature marks that hinted at his methodical approach? Was he too clever, his planning too meticulous, his knowledge of police work too intimate? Or was justice simply outmatched by a predator who knew how to hide in plain sight, blending into the very communities he terrorized, his ordinariness a shield that no one could pierce? In 2018, the case that seemed unsolvable cracked wide open, not through a lucky break, a witness, or a confession, but through a revolution in science. Genealogy, a tool that turned the killer's own DNA into his downfall, a betrayal written in his genes. For decades, DNA from crime scenes, preserved in rape kits, bloodstains, semen, had been a frustrating clue, a genetic fingerprint with no match in Cody's, the FBI's criminal database, because the killer had never been arrested for a qualifying crime, his profile absent from the system. Detectives had run the DNA repeatedly, year after year, hoping for a hit. But the databases of the 1980s and 90s were small, their reach limited, and the killer's silence seemed absolute. By the 2010s, a new approach emerged, inspired by the explosive popularity of consumer DNA tests like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe, which had millions uploading their genetic profiles to find relatives or trace their heritage. Genetic genealogists, working with cold case investigators, realized they could use public genealogy databases to trace unknown DNA through family trees, a method that had already reunited adoptees with birth parents or identified remains in disaster zones. In early 2018, a team led by Paul Holes, a relentless Contra Costa County investigator who'd spent decades on the case, took a bold step. They uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA profile to GeneMatch, a free, open-source genealogy site where users voluntarily share their DNA to find cousins or build family trees, unaware that their data could become a weapon against a killer. The process was painstaking, a blend of cutting-edge science and old-school detective work, requiring patience, precision, and a touch of genius. The killer's DNA matched distant relatives, third, fourth, even fifth cousins, who'd uploaded their profiles, their genetic markers overlapping with his at key points, like scattered pieces of a puzzle. Genealogists like Barbara Venter and Cece Moore, experts in forensic genealogy, built a sprawling family tree, cross-referencing genetic data with historical records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, death notices, obituaries, census data, newspaper clippings, even old phone books. They traced lineages back generations, through 19th century ancestors, mapping branches that fanned out across the U.S., from New York to California. They narrowed down suspects by age. The killer would be in his 60s or 70s by 2018. Location: he'd lived in or near Sacramento in the 1970s. And lifestyle: he'd likely moved south, given the crime pattern. They ruled out dead ends one by one, deceased relatives, women, people too young or too old, those living far from California, until the tree converged on a single name: Joseph James DeAngelo, a 72-year-old retiree living in Citrus Heights, a Sacramento suburb just miles from the killer's early crimes in Rancho Cordova. It was a staggering moment, the needle in the haystack, glinting in the data. A man whose life seemed unremarkable, but whose genes screamed guilt. Detectives surveilled DeAngelo for days, watching his quiet routine, mowing his manicured lawn, tinkering in his garage, riding his motorcycle. A man who seemed frail, even harmless, his age belying the terror he'd once been. They collected his DNA covertly, first from a car door handle inconclusive, then from a tissue discarded in his trash, a sample that glowed under the lab's lights. The results were a bombshell. The DNA matched the Golden State Killer's with near-perfect certainty, a 99.9999% probability that ended 40 years of silence, a scientific checkmate that left no room for doubt. On April 24, 2018, DeAngelo was arrested in his modest home, his face blank as SWAT teams cuffed him, his neighbors stunned, their jaws dropping as news helicopters buzzed overhead, cameras capturing a moment that felt surreal. The world reeled. How could a technology used to find long-lost cousins unmask a serial killer who'd evaded capture for decades, his crimes a fading memory to all but those he'd scarred? What did it mean that the answer was hiding in a database anyone could access, a digital Pandora's box of secrets that turned family ties into a trap? And how had this monster lived among us? His crimes locked away in a past he thought was untouchable. His ordinariness a fortress that crumbled under the weight of his own DNA. Joseph James DeAngelo was no ordinary retiree. He was a monster living a double life, a predator whose ordinariness was his greatest disguise, a chameleon who walked among us, his darkness hidden behind a mask of normalcy so convincing it defied belief. Born November 8, 1945, in Bath, New York, he grew up in a middle-class family, the son of an army sergeant. His childhood unremarkable save for a reported incident of witnessing his sister's assault, a trauma some speculate fueled his later rage, though DeAngelo never confirmed it. He served in the Navy during Vietnam from 1964 to 1967, working as a damage control man, learning knots and discipline that would later mark his crimes. After his discharge, he moved to California, earning a degree in criminal justice at Sacramento State University, a chilling irony given his future. In the early 1970s, he was a police officer, serving in small towns like Exeter, 1973 to 1976, and Auburn, 1976 to 1979, even as he committed his early crimes as the Visalia ransacker, a burglar responsible for over 100 break-ins and one murder, a precursor to his later horrors. His law enforcement training explained his chilling precision, knowledge of police tactics, evidence collection, and crime scene preservation. He knew how to case a neighborhood, staking out homes for weeks, noting patterns like a hunter studying prey. He knew how to avoid leaving fingerprints, wearing gloves even in summer heat. He knew how to manipulate a scene, planting false clues or stealing items to mislead investigators, like a chess player thinking 3 moves ahead. He used police scanners to monitor patrols, wore masks or balaclavas to obscure his face, and chose escape routes, canals, bike paths, wooded lots that baffled pursuers, his knowledge of Sacramento's layout almost supernatural. By day, he was a family man, married in 1973 to Sharon Huddle, a law student who later became an attorney. Raising 3 daughters in a tidy suburban home in Citrus Heights, his neighbors describing him as gruff but unremarkable, a man who yelled at kids for stepping on his lawn or cursed at dogs barking too loud, but otherwise kept to himself, his garage a sanctuary of tools and solitude. By night, he was a predator, his cold, calculating mind orchestrating horrors that defied comprehension, his rage and control unleashed in the darkness, a secret life that never bled into his public one. Survivors described as eerie calm, his ability to dominate every detail, from the intricate diamond knots he tied, tight enough to bruise, to the taunts he whispered, his voice a low growl that seemed to come from somewhere inhuman, a sound that haunted their dreams for decades. He'd sob or whimper during attacks, feigning distress to confuse victims, a tactic that revealed a mind obsessed with manipulation, a predator who fed on fear as much as violence. He'd pause to eat, to pace, to mutter to himself, as if savoring the moment, his control absolute even in chaos. Yet he blended seamlessly into society, his anger hidden behind a mask of normalcy, his secrets buried so deep they seemed unreachable. After his last known crime in 1986, the murder of Janelle Cruz, he vanished from the criminal radar, living quietly for decades, working as a mechanic at a Save Mart distribution center in Roseville from 1990 until his retirement in 2017, his co-workers noting his temper but never suspecting his past. His family, wife, daughters, grandchildren, had no inkling of his crimes. His double life, so complete it seemed impenetrable, a wall of silence built brick by brick over 40 years. Why did he stop? leaving no trace after 1986, his spree ending as abruptly as it began. Did he fear capture as DNA technology advanced, the news of codes and genetic profiling seeping into his consciousness? Had he grown too old, his body betraying the stamina his crimes demanded? Or had he simply satisfied his dark urges, the hunger for control that drove him finally sated, his mind turning to other obsessions? How could a man so brutal, so meticulous, so methodical, so terrifying, live among us unnoticed? A murderer and rapist whose neighbors waved hello, a father whose daughters hugged him goodnight, oblivious to the monster within. In June 2020, Joseph James DeAngelo faced justice in a sprawling Sacramento courtroom, a former ballroom at Sacramento State University, converted to hold the trial, its chandeliers dimmed by the weight of the moment. He was a frail, 74-year-old figure in an orange jumpsuit, hunched in a wheelchair, his face hidden behind a clear plastic mask due to COVID protocols, a stark contrast to the fiery predator who'd once terrorized California, his physical decline a cruel irony for those who remembered his athletic prowess. But his presence was heavy, a silent force that brought survivors, investigators, and a nation to a reckoning, a moment 40 years in the making it. The trial was more than a legal proceeding. It was a catharsis, a chance to confront a monster, to give voice to the pain he'd silenced, to reclaim lives stolen by his darkness. Over 11 days in August 2020, more than 70 survivors and victims' families delivered impact statements, their voices trembling with the raw, aching mix of grief, anger, and resilience, each word a reclaiming of power. Women recounted their attacks, their lives forever altered by the nights he'd invaded their homes, the sound of his voice, the weight of his body, the flicker of his flashlight in the dark, memories that stole decades of peace, joy, and trust. They spoke of marriages dissolved, careers derailed, children raised in the shadow of trauma, their strength forged in the crucible of survival. Children and siblings of murder victims, like the families of Sherry Domingo, Greg Sanchez, Debbie Strauss, and Janelle Cruz, spoke of growing up without parents or sisters, their lives defined by absence, their holidays marked by empty chairs, their questions unanswered, their grief a lifelong companion. "You took my mother's laughter," one daughter said, her voice breaking. "But you didn't take my hope." Another survivor, a woman raped in 1977, stared at DeAngelo, declaring, "I survived you, and now I'm here to watch you fall." Her words a defiant roar that drew nods from the crowd. DeAngelo, who'd once thrived on control, sat silent, his face blank, his eyes averted, his hands clasped in his lap, as if the weight of their words pressed him into the floor, his presence a ghost of the terror he'd been. On June 29th, 2020, he broke his silence, pleading guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and 13 counts of kidnapping to commit crimes, admitting dozens of uncharged rapes and assaults, crimes for which statutes of limitations had expired. In a monotone whisper, his voice a faint rasp, devoid of emotion, as he read, "I am truly sorry." He confessed to 161 additional crimes, a staggering tally that underscored the scope of his terror, each admission a nail in the coffin of his freedom. Prosecutors, led by Sacramento DA and Maurice Schubert and a coalition of county attorneys, detailed his atrocities with unflinching clarity, presenting a timeline of crimes, forensic evidence, and survivor testimonies that painted a grotesque portrait of a predator whose cruelty knew no bounds. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA matches across multiple crime scenes, survivor accounts corroborated by physical evidence, torn clothing, ligature marks, stolen items like a diamond ring engraved with the victim's initials found in DeAngelo's home decades later, a trophy he'd kept. On August 21st, 2020, Judge Michael Bowman delivered the sentence: 11 consecutive life terms without parole for the murders, plus 8 additional life terms for kidnapping and other charges, and 15 years for weapons enhancements, a sentence that ensured DeAngelo would die in a cell at Ironwood State Prison, his final years spent in isolation, a fitting end for a man who thrived on control. The courtroom erupted in applause, tears streaming, hugs shared among survivors, a moment of closure for a state haunted by his shadow. For many, it was justice, a monster unmasked, a nightmare ended, a chance to reclaim their lives, to sleep without fear, to honor their loved ones with peace instead of pain. But it was bittersweet, the scars too deep, the losses too vast, the question of why unanswered, DeAngelo's silence a final act of defiance, his lack of remorse a wound that refused to heal. How did it feel for survivors to face the man who'd haunted their dreams for decades, to see him reduced to a frail shell, his power stripped away by their own courage? What did DeAngelo's mechanical confession, his refusal to meet their eyes, reveal about the mind of a predator who'd lived for control, even now withholding the truth as his final power play? How do you measure justice for crimes that stole so much, lives, love, security, from so many, for so long, leaving a legacy of trauma that lingers like a ghost? The Golden State Killer case didn't just solve a mystery. It revolutionized criminal justice, redefining how we hunt the uncatchable, a seismic shift that rippled through time and across borders. Genetic genealogy, once a niche tool for hobbyists tracing their ancestry or finding distant cousins, became a game-changer, a scientific sledgehammer that shattered the walls of cold cases, unlocking secrets buried in DNA. Since DeAngelo's arrest in 2018, over 200 cases have been solved using the technique, from the 1975 murder of Lynn Lilly Knight in Toronto to the 1987 killings of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Queilenborg in Washington State, proving that no crime is too old, no killer too clever when science takes the lead. It's a double-edged sword, a beacon of hope for families desperate for closure, yet a Pandora's box of ethical dilemmas. How much privacy are we willing to sacrifice to catch monsters? Should public DNA databases like GeneMatch, built on voluntary uploads, be open to law enforcement without consent? Their data a public good or a private trust? What happens when our genetic code, the blueprint of who we are, becomes a tool for surveillance, a key to both justice and control? These questions loom large, sparking debates in Congress, lawsuits from privacy advocates, and soul-searching policies from companies like Ancestry DNA, which now warn users their data could be subpoenaed. The case also cemented the legacy of Michelle McNamara, whose 2018 book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, published posthumously after her tragic death in 2016, became a symbol of relentless pursuit, her haunting prose blending journalism, memoir, and mystery to keep the killer's name alive. Her work inspired investigators like Paul Holes, galvanized public interest, and gave the killer his name. Her phrase, "I'll be gone in the dark," a chilling prophecy fulfilled when DeAngelo was arrested just months after the book's release, her HBO documentary amplifying her voice. The case was a triumph of persistence, detectives who never quit, survivors who refused to be silenced, genealogists who turned data into justice, and a testament to human resilience, the drive to right wrongs, to heal wounds no matter how old. But it's also a chilling reminder. Predators don't always lurk in alleys or hide in shadows. They can be cops, fathers, neighbors, men like DeAngelo, whose ordinariness was a shield, whose lives seemed normal until truth exposed them. His capture forces us to rethink what evil looks like, to question the safety of our communities, to wonder who else might be hiding behind a mask of normalcy, their crimes a secret waiting for a spark to ignite it. The Golden State Killer case opened a new era, one where DNA is both detective and judge, solving cases like the 1973 murder of Linda O'Keefe in Newport Beach or identifying the Happy Face Killer in Oregon. But it's also a warning. For every case solved, thousands remain cold, case files gathering dust, their victims waiting, their families praying for a breakthrough. What does this mean for the future of justice, where our genes hold the keys to truth? How many more killers are out there, living quiet lives like DeAngelo, their DNA a silent clock ticking toward exposure? How do we balance the power of science with the sanctity of our secrets? And what will society look like when no one can hide forever? The Golden State Killer was a phantom for over 4 decades, a predator who thought he'd outrun time, truth, and justice itself. A man whose crimes cast a shadow over California, a darkness that seemed eternal. Joseph James DeAngelo's capture is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of survivors, the brilliance of investigators, and the relentless march of science. A reminder that even the deepest secrets, buried under decades of silence, can claw their way to light. It's a story of triumph, a victory over a monster who thrived on fear, a proof that justice, though delayed, can still burn bright. But it lingers with haunting questions that echo in our minds like footsteps in the dark. How many more killers are still out there, hiding in plain sight, their crimes a whisper buried in the past, until science finds them too? Could genetic genealogy unlock every cold case, bringing peace to every grieving family? Or are we opening a Pandora's box of privacy and power, where our DNA becomes both our shield and our shackle? The victims of the Golden State Killer, those who died, those who survived, those who loved them, deserve more than to be defined by his darkness. They deserve to be remembered for their courage, their resilience, their refusal to let his terror erase their light. Sherry Domingo, Greg Sanchez, Manuela Withun, Janelle Cruz, and the 54 known survivors, plus countless others whose stories remain untold. Their names are called to honor, to heal, to keep fighting for truth. So, what do you think? How far should we go to catch monsters like DeAngelo? Is genetic genealogy the future of justice, a silver bullet for every unsolved mystery, or a step too far, a power we must wield with care? And who else is out there, living a lie, waiting for their DNA to betray them? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading every single one to see what you make of this chilling, groundbreaking saga. If this deep dive into the Golden State Killer's reign of terror kept you hooked, heart racing, mind reeling with questions, then smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell for more true crime stories that peel back the shadows, exposing the darkest corners of humanity. Want more mysteries that challenge justice? Check out our videos on the Zodiac Killer, the D.B. Cooper hijacking, Jonestown, or the unsolved Black Dahlia murder right here on the channel. Share this video with your fellow true crime fanatics. Spark a debate. Get your friends talking. Because this story isn't just about one killer. It's about the future of catching them all. A world where no secret stays buried forever. Thanks for watching. Stay curious and stay safe. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll chase another shadow into the light, another truth waiting to be found.